Hello and welcome to the Military Chessboard. It is an absolute pleasure to have you joining us today for this deep dive. Whether you are settling into your favorite comfortable chair with a warm cup of tea, or perhaps just taking a quiet, deliberate moment for yourself, we are genuinely thrilled to share this time with you.
Yes, thank you for tuning in. It is a privilege to be here to unpack all of this with you.
Today we are looking closely at a truly historic and dramatic shift in the ongoing conflict between the United States and Iran. We have been carefully going through a very large stack of freshly translated military reports, geopolitical analyses, and real-time combat data. And I must share with you straight away, the sheer scale of what is unfolding right now is quite staggering.
It really is. The volume of the data coming across our desks this week has been, well, unprecedented in recent military history.
To give you a clear picture of the magnitude, in just the first 24 hours of this new conflict, the United States and Israel conducted an astonishing 1,000 military strikes. We also have confirmed reports from the sources that Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has been killed in these initial operations.
That is a massive decapitation strike right at the onset of the conflict.
Exactly. But here's the detail that truly stands out from the documents.
Yeah.
What is currently finishing this war is not the futuristic, invisible, high-tech weaponry that started it. It is a 74-year-old bomber. Our mission today is to gently but thoroughly explore exactly how the United States is dismantling Iran's military, why they made the fascinating choice to switch to this older technology, and what all of this means for the global geopolitical chessboard.
It is a fascinating subject, and it really highlights how modern strategy frequently relies on a carefully balanced mixture of the very new and the very old.
Spot on. And to help us navigate this highly complex strategy, we have our resident expert, MC Morgan Jones, joining us today. So where do we begin to understand this shift?
Well, thank you. To understand where we are currently positioned with these older bombers, we must first look at how this sequence of events began. The initial phase of this conflict is being referred to in military circles as the surgery.
The surgery. That implies something highly precise, does it not?
It does. And the operation did not begin with massive physical explosions. It began entirely invisibly, deep within the digital realm. The reports show that the United States and Israel initiated widespread cyber operations aimed at jamming and spoofing Iran's radar networks.
I see. So before any planes even crossed the border, the digital infrastructure was targeted.
Quite right. If we think about how this works practically, imagine you are trying to guard your home. Suddenly, an intruder manages to cover your security cameras with thick blankets and completely disconnects your telephone lines.
You were left entirely blind.
Exactly. You are isolated and completely unable to call for help or coordinate a defense.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. It is a terrifying prospect to be made completely blind before the physical conflict even begins. Hearing about that level of digital disruption makes me wonder about the immediate next steps.
Well, once the security cameras were blinded, that is when the highly advanced modern aircraft moved into the area. The sources detail that B-52 stealth bombers and fifth-generation fighter jets were deployed immediately.
And because the radar was already down, these advanced aircraft could just slip into Iranian airspace completely undetected by the defenders.
Spot on. They unleashed a massive, incredibly precise firestorm. They specifically targeted Iran's air defense systems, their naval assets, and, as we mentioned earlier, the critical leadership structures.
It reads like an overwhelming show of surgical force. But help me understand why this specific sequence of events was so vital to the overall strategy. Why not just send in the heavy bombers straight away?
The primary objective here was to achieve a state known as air superiority. When a military force achieves air superiority, it means they essentially control the sky without significant interference from the opposing force.
Right, so by blinding the enemy first and then methodically removing their surface-to-air missiles.
Which are the weapons designed to shoot planes down, yes.
The United States completely cleared the airspace.
They did. They removed the immediate, most dangerous threats. That deliberate clearing of the board is what made it perfectly safe to bring in the much heavier, older, and slower machinery for the subsequent phase of the campaign.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this transition is where the strategy shifts dramatically. We move from phase one, the surgery, right into phase two, which military analysts are calling the sledgehammer.
A very fitting name, as you will see.
We have moved from highly advanced stealth to sending massive 70-year-old planes into a modern conflict zone. Tell us about the capability of these older bombers and why they're being utilized now.
The aircraft brought in for this sledgehammer phase is the B-52 Stratofortress. In aviation circles, it is affectionately known as the Big Ugly Fat Fellow.
That is quite the nickname.
It is an enormous, slow-moving aircraft, and it possesses absolutely zero stealth capabilities. It cannot hide from radar whatsoever.
However, because those incredibly expensive B-2 stealth bombers already kicked the doors down and destroyed the radar and defensive missiles, these massive B-52s can now fly over Iranian airspace with near total impunity.
Exactly. What the B-52 lacks in stealth, it replaces with sheer, terrifying capacity. A single B-52 can hold an astounding 70,000 pounds of payload.
70,000 pounds. That is a staggering amount of weight.
To put that massive number into perspective, it can carry up to 70 precision-guided bombs, known as JDAMs. These are highly accurate munitions that range from 500 pounds all the way up to 2,000 pounds each. The amount of sustained firepower a fleet of these bombers brings to the table is immense.
But hearing about these enormous, slow-moving bombers loitering in the sky makes me wonder about the safety of the crews. Even with Iran's primary defenses destroyed, surely there is still some residual risk to these older planes.
It is a valid concern.
A surviving soldier on the ground with a portable missile could surely still pose a threat to something that big and slow.
Military planners factor that residual risk in very carefully. To neutralize the threat of any rogue surviving missile launchers, the United States is likely equipping these bombers with JSMs.
JSSMs, what does that stand for?
It stands for Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles. To avoid the heavy military terminology, you can think of these as highly intelligent, very long-range flying torpedoes.
Right, so they do not even need to be directly over the target.
Precisely. They are capable of traveling anywhere from 230 miles to 575 miles.
Goodness, that is a remarkable distance.
This extensive range means the B-52 can fly safely outside of Iran's borders, launch these missiles from a vast distance, and hit their targets with perfect precision without ever crossing into a dangerous zone.
So they are essentially throwing highly precise rocks from several towns over, completely out of harm's way.
That paints a very clear picture of the tactics, yes.
Which brings us to the realities on the ground, because the numbers we are looking at in these reports are quite confronting. In just the first 72 hours of this conflict, the United States and Israel successfully shattered 2,000 separate targets.
It is a phenomenal scale of destruction in such a short window.
And we must take a moment here to acknowledge the severe human cost of this campaign. It is a sobering reality of this level of warfare. According to reports from Iran's health ministry, 920 people have been killed.
And other estimates, looking specifically at the military casualties, suggest that well over 1,000 members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have been eliminated.
It is deeply sobering, and it reflects the absolute intensity of the bombardment. When we look past those immediate figures and examine the underlying strategy of this destruction, what exactly are these B-52s systematically aiming at with those long-range strikes?
The targeting is incredibly methodical. The primary targets right now are command and control nodes, which are often referred to simply as C2. They are also systematically hitting weapons production facilities and ammunition depots.
Command and control. So the leadership and communication hubs.
Yes. If we think of a nation's military structure as a human body, the weapons and the troops are the arms and legs, but the command and control nodes are the brain. By severing the brain from the body, you completely paralyze the opponent's ability to coordinate any meaningful response.
We know from previous analyses that Iran relies heavily on its ballistic missiles. How does severing this brain from the body impact that specific major threat?
Iran's single biggest threat in the region has always been its massive stockpile of ballistic missiles. Estimates place that stockpile anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000 missiles.
That is a formidable arsenal.
It is. However, a missile is practically useless if you do not have a coordinated, functioning system to aim it, authorize its launch, and fire it. By systematically destroying those command and control nodes, the United States has left Iran entirely unable to coordinate its missile launchers.
The remaining missiles are essentially just heavy tubes of metal sitting on the ground, entirely disconnected from any central command structure.
Exactly. They are isolated and inert.
The statistics in the data really highlight how successful that specific strategy has been. Because of these strikes on the command nodes, Iran's ballistic missile shots have plummeted by 86% since the first day of fighting.
An 86% drop is a catastrophic failure of their launch capabilities.
And even more telling, There has been a further 23% drop in just the last 24 hours alone. Furthermore, their one-way attack drone launches are down by 73%. We are quite literally watching the slow, methodical whittling down of an entire nation's military strategy.
The capability to project power, which is exactly what those missiles and drones represented for Iran, has been effectively neutralized in a matter of days. We are observing a carefully calculated dismantling of a long-standing military posture.
Here's where it gets really interesting, especially for those of you listening who appreciate the practical financial side of global events. A natural question arises. If the United States has the most advanced, invisible stealth bombers in the world, the B-2s, and presumably an enormous defense budget, why would they switch to using a 70-year-old non-stealth airplane?
That is a brilliant question.
Why not continue using the absolute best technology available for the duration of the conflict?
It comes down to the undeniable mathematics and logistics of sustained warfare. We have to look at the timeline context provided by the sources. Based on projections shared by President Trump, the United States is anticipating that this conflict will last 4 to 5 weeks, and potentially even longer.
And 4 to 5 weeks is a very long time to sustain high-intensity aerial bombardment.
Precisely. When you are planning for a long-term, multi-week campaign, the economics become a vital strategic factor. Breaking down the costs side by side is quite revealing.
Let us have a look at those numbers.
The B-2 stealth bomber is an incredible piece of machinery, but it costs approximately $2 billion simply to build one single aircraft. Furthermore, because of its highly sensitive stealth coatings and complex technology, it requires a massive amount of maintenance.
So it's not just the sticker price, it is the running costs.
Exactly. It costs roughly $200,000 per flight hour just to keep a B-2 in the air. If you run a standard 30-hour mission, that is $6 million gone in just over a day for one single plane.
$6 million for one mission. And if one were to accidentally crash or suffer a mechanical failure, that is a $2 billion loss.
It is an immense financial risk to sustain over a 4 or 5 week period. Now let us contrast that with the B-52. Even when factoring in the recent modern upgrades the fleet has received, a B-52 sits at around $640 million per unit.
Which is significant, but a fraction of the B-2.
But the real savings are found in the running costs. It only costs about $70,000 per hour to fly a B-52. That is nearly a third of the cost of operating the stealth bomber.
So military analysts are pointing out this is an incredibly efficient financial strategy.
We are. The analysts highlight that switching to the B-52 is a genius financial move by the military planners. It allows the United States to maintain a devastating round-the-clock bombardment of Iranian targets for weeks on end without completely draining the defense budget.
Most importantly, it achieves this without risking the loss of a fragile $2 billion stealth asset in a sky that has already been cleared of its major threats.
Spot on. Once the expensive tools have opened the door, you send in the cost-effective workhorses to finish the job.
It is incredibly practical when you lay the mathematics out clearly like that. But reading through these reports brings up a very natural question, one that you at home are probably pondering right now. We have discussed how quickly the doors were kicked down in Phase 1. But did Iran not possess powerful defense systems?
They certainly claim to, yes.
We have frequently heard reports over the years about their military strengths and their robust defensive networks. How did their systems fail so rapidly against the initial cyber and stealth attacks?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it tells a very revealing story about modern military procurement and engineering. Iran's defense network was heavily reliant on systems known as the Russian S-300 and the Chinese HQ-7,
which are well-known systems in global defense circles.
On paper, these are highly capable surface-to-air missile systems. But crucially, a massive portion of Iran's network did not consist of original, factory-fresh models imported directly from Russia or China.
So what were they using?
They relied heavily on cheap, homegrown, reverse-engineered copycats.
Reverse-engineered, meaning they essentially took an original system apart, saw how it functioned mechanically, and attempted to build their own cheaper versions domestically.
That is correct. You can compare it to buying a cheap, counterfeit luxury watch. It might look identical on the outside, and it might even tick normally under perfect conditions. But the moment you take it deep underwater and put it under immense pressure, the inferior internal mechanisms completely fail.
That makes perfect sense.
When you reverse engineer a highly complex radar system, you might get the physical screens to turn on, but you completely miss the nuanced internal software upgrades. Because Iran copied these systems without innovating or genuinely understanding the deeply complex software architecture, they failed to fix glaring vulnerabilities.
Specifically, their homemade systems were highly vulnerable to modern electronic warfare.
Exactly. Because their counterfeit systems lacked modern electronic protections, they were totally exposed to specific, highly advanced weapons, such as the Israeli icebreaker missile.
Tell us about the icebreaker missile.
These missiles are specifically designed to confuse and blind older radar systems. Iran essentially built a massive, imposing wall around their country, but they completely forgot to put functioning locks on the gates.
It was a massive strategic gamble by the Iranian military, and it failed catastrophically.
It truly did.
The result of that failure is quite dramatic. The combat data shows that right now, because their network has collapsed so thoroughly, Iran is desperately scrambling to move whatever functioning defense systems they have left.
They are in full retreat in terms of defensive posture.
They are moving them from the eastern side of their country over to the west, where they anticipate more incoming attacks. But of course, by doing that, they are leaving their entire eastern flank wide open.
It creates a massive blind spot that the American B-52s can easily exploit for those long-range standoff attacks we discussed earlier.
It creates a classic, devastating tactical dilemma. They are pulling a small blanket up to cover their shoulders, but in doing so, they are leaving their feet entirely exposed to the freezing cold.
A perfect analogy. The United States military is perfectly positioned to take full advantage of that exposure.
Which naturally leads us to look at where this is all heading next. The scope of this conflict is clearly no longer just confined to the landmass of Iran. It is already expanding outward.
The geopolitical map is shifting very quickly.
For example, the reports indicate that the United States recently torpedoed an Iranian military vessel, the Iris Dana. But what is truly remarkable is the location. It was not in the Persian Gulf. It was all the way out in international waters off the southern coast of Sri Lanka.
That is thousands of miles away from the primary conflict zone.
Exactly. This geographic expansion raises a very important question about the overarching long-term strategy. We have clearly seen Phase 1, the surgical blinding of the electronic defenses. We are currently witnessing Phase 2, the sledgehammer of the B-52s, dismantling the physical infrastructure.
So we must ask the critical question, what exactly is Phase 3?
And the geopolitical analysis points towards some very heavy, complex possibilities regarding Phase 3.
We must look at the internal dynamics of Iran to understand those possibilities. According to expert analysis from Chatham House, which is a highly respected international affairs think tank, the Iranian people are not currently rising up in any significant numbers to overthrow the regime themselves.
Despite the immense pressure from the outside, there are no major signs of domestic opposition taking control from within.
Right. So if the government's military infrastructure is completely destroyed by the bombings, but the citizens do not overthrow the leadership, it creates a massive power vacuum.
And that resulting vacuum raises the very real, very serious possibility of boots on the ground.
This means the United States might be preparing to send actual soldiers into Iran to finish the job of toppling the regime directly. History shows us that when a central power is heavily degraded from the air but does not fully collapse, foreign ground forces are often required to finalize the regime change.
If the aerial bombardment does not cause the government to collapse from within, a ground invasion becomes the logical, albeit incredibly complex and dangerous, Phase 3.
The ripple effects of a potential ground invasion, or even just the total collapse of the Iranian government, would certainly be felt all over the world.
Let us expand on that. What happens to the broader international community if this regime falls?
If we zoom out to the global stage, the broader implications are massive. If the Iranian regime falls completely, it is not just an isolated event localized in the Middle East. It represents a catastrophic structural blow to Russia and to Vladimir Putin.
Because of the deep ties between Moscow and Tehran.
Precisely. For years, Russia has heavily relied on Iran. This reliance is not just as a global political ally to counter the influence of the West. Practically speaking, Iran has been a massive supplier of weapons to Moscow, particularly the drones that Russia has used extensively in their own ongoing conflicts.
So, without the steady supply chain and political backing of Iran, Russia is suddenly deeply isolated on the world stage.
The entire balance of power in the Middle East, and by extension the broader global order, is fundamentally shifting right before our eyes.
It truly is a historic moment in global affairs, and it is certainly a lot of profound information to process. As we wrap up today's main discussion, I want to summarize the core of what we have explored from these documents. We often assume that the future of warfare belongs exclusively to the invisible, the silent, and the ultra-expensive technology.
That is certainly the narrative we see most often.
But as we have seen today, sometimes the key to a modern, decisive military victory is not a billion-dollar piece of futuristic machinery. Sometimes the key is the simple, incredibly cost-effective endurance of a 74-year-old machine that just keeps flying.
The B-52 is proving that straightforward power, logistical endurance, and financial practicality still heavily influence the outcome of modern conflicts.
It serves as a powerful reminder that fundamental strategy, understanding operational costs, maintaining logistics, and applying sustained pressure remains just as important today as it was 70 years ago.
I completely agree. It has been an absolute pleasure exploring this topic with you today.
Now, before we say goodbye for today, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought. Something for you to ponder over your next cup of tea. We have talked extensively today about how Iran's military infrastructure is being pulverized and its central leadership has been systematically dismantled.
Indeed, the command structure is failing.
But what happens to the massive, sprawling network of proxy groups spread across the entire Middle East? For years, these various militant factions have relied entirely on Tehran for their daily orders, their overarching strategy, and most importantly, their funding. When the head of the snake is completely gone, what do the fangs do?
Do they simply wither away without that central funding, or do they become unpredictable independent hazards operating on their own accord?
It is a complex, deeply concerning question, and one the world will soon have to answer. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today on this deep dive. If you found this discussion valuable and informative, please do us a favor and hit the like button. We would also genuinely love to hear your perspective on these historic events, so please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts with us. And of course, make sure you subscribe to Military Chessboard so you do not miss our next deep dive. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time.